Good evening, everybody. We are looking at Buddhism. Still talking about this whole system of beliefs, and most Buddhists would consider themselves. Well, I don't know. I don't want to generalize, but a lot of Buddhists would consider that to be a religion. Again, some people take it more as a way of life. We had talked a little bit last time about there's a secular Buddhism movement that's in the U.S., but in other places as well. So that's kind of some of the Buddhist practices and ideals in normal life without like sort of a religious tilt to that. But some interesting things to talk about. But we are going to get started here in a second. Before we start, though, would you pray with me? Let's bow. Lord, our awesome God, we love you so much. Thank you for providing for us, taking care of us, for giving us this time to think through some of the worldviews and thoughts of people around us, that we can be prepared to discuss these things with them, that we can understand where they're coming from, that we can be careful not to offend them unintentionally, but to, in everything that we do, look for your truth and look for ways we can communicate with others that are effective, that will spread your gospel and spread your kingdom to all those around us. God, help us to be patient, help us to be mindful, help us to extend grace and mercy and compassion to those around us, and help us in all that we do to grow closer to you. It's in Jesus we pray. Amen. Good deal. So, we're going to look, if you're looking at a book, we're on page 38, and looking at some things in Buddhism, some of the specific beliefs. We kind of, last time, did a hodgepodge. We talked about several different things involving where the religion started, where it came from, some of the roots, major differences between Buddhism and Christianity, and some of the other monotheistic type of religions. Again, Buddhism is not polytheistic, as in worshiping several other gods and deities. It's not really monotheistic either. It's kind of, the way I've heard it described in a lot of ways, it's kind of we are one with everything. And so it's this mindfulness. And the ultimate goal to a Buddhist, we've talked about this before, is the enlightenment. A lot of people call it nirvana. Came to my attention today that not everybody who's a Buddhist uses the term nirvana. They might say enlightenment. They might use the term they're reaching Buddhahood. And that's sort of a more accessible thing for certain groups to become a Buddha themselves, which just means enlightened, reaches the state of nirvana that has a connection with everything and realizes that they are part of this great whole. And there's some metaphysical stuff going on in there too about how they view the mind and how they view consciousness and all that. And depending on what branch of Buddhism you're going to find different things. So, if I didn't thoroughly confuse you enough, let's keep going. We're going to look at some of the major beliefs. So, let's take a look, page 38, beliefs of Buddhism. The most common beliefs, and there's like words for all of these, and so like the belief system is called the Dharma, D-H-A-R-M-A, and the Dharma, the belief system encompasses these Four Noble Truths, and so Four Noble Truths that kind of tie everything together. First one is that there is a thing called suffering, and suffering is the greatest problem known to man. This is the dukkha. A lot of suffering, and it has pain, misery, sorrow, unfulfillment. All of this is like the problem with humans. If we could get rid of suffering, then we would be great in the minds of a Buddhist. The second noble truth kind of goes along with that. Well, all of these go along with that, actually. The second noble truth, everything is impermanent, ever-changing. The doctrine of anicca, also samudaya, for what that means to you. And we suffer because we desire things that are impermanent. There is this nature of everything is just constantly changing, and we're like grasping after something we're grasping after the wind, something that's constantly moving, can't really nail it down. And so that's why we suffer, because our cravings, the things that we desire, even when you get your desires fulfilled and you meet that, you always want more. And it's this whole, I'm constantly chasing something that I think will lead to fulfillment, but in the ultimate sense, it does not. Which, I mean, that's some good stuff, right? Because if we live our lives constantly pursuing things that are fluid, ever-changing, impermanent, that is a major cause of suffering. And so, that really makes sense. I think that really resonates with me in a lot of ways. Third noble truth, the way to liberate oneself from suffering is by eliminating all desire. We must stop craving that which is impermanent. And that's nirodha. But anyways, it's this thing. How do we eliminate suffering? How do we eliminate all of these things? If we take it back and think, okay, our suffering is caused by our desires. If we can stop having desires whatsoever, then we would fix the problem of suffering. And I mean, that does make sense, because if you don't desire things, then no matter what happens, you'll be okay with it. And so what happens a lot of times is the way to enlightenment, to realize that our desires are weighing us down, that we bring suffering on ourselves because of that. What we need to do is just, no matter what happens to us, positive or negative, don't even look at it like that. Don't focus too much on what has happened to you, whether it's a good thing, and because what happens. And the teaching here is the more that we desire those good things, something really good, positive happens in our life, the more that we desire that, the more we get upset when we don't have those things. And so it's this negative karma. It brings us down. Or if we're suffering and going through something really bad and we don't like it, well, that could bring negative feelings and can stop us from actually doing the things that we need to do, in order to be more fulfilled and happy and that sort of thing. Yeah, and I think in a lot of ways it is, because, how do we get rid of these desires? Well, if I separate myself from all forms of desire, then I can train myself to be okay with that situation. And that is one pathway of Buddhism, definitely, and we see, Buddhist monks who are very separated from things of the world and all desires and even families and all that, just coming out, being completely separate. And so that is definitely one form of this. And so through all that, that's how you stop the cravings, is what they would say. And then the fourth noble truth, that we can eliminate desire using this eightfold path. And there's 8 points here, categorized in 3 major sections. And so 8 things of how to eliminate suffering. And you go through these things. And from what I hear, and from what I see Buddhism teaches, these 8 points, they say, if you start this path and you can't do all of them at once, that's okay. Just do what you can and then add on later. And then eventually, once you're able to get all those down, then you can get to the enlightenment, the Buddhahood, the nirvana. That's like the ultimate goal. So that's where we're going with this. So anything on those 4 noble truths before we go into the Eightfold Path? Okay, sounds good. The Eightfold Path, so there are things, so dealing with our wisdom, first of all, having the right understanding. What I mean by that is the understanding of karma, of what good karma is versus bad karma, and how it drives this cycle of rebirth called samsara, and has the concept of reincarnation, and that everything that you see is sort of an extension of what reality is. Like, we live in a place. It's kind of, ever seen The Matrix? It kind of like that what we live in is just like a construct, and this isn't what is real. And so that's kind of like it is. But it's more of a deep connection of what we see, what we feel in our experiences can be misleading. And so we need to separate ourselves from our experiences. And so that way we can reach this nirvana. So there's that. Right thought, just the things that we think about, the things that we dwell on, and that's changed through some of these other things. Right speech. Now there's some really good stuff in there, like not lying, not being dishonest, rudeness, not having rude talk, not gossiping. In general, things that we would say are good things to avoid. Right action, don't kill anybody or anything. Don't injure, don't steal, no sexual misconduct, that sort of thing. Stay away from those things. The right livelihood, this is the one that I hear a lot of people struggle with because, in general, they say you want to avoid careers and doing things for a job that include bringing any kind of harm or suffering to any living creature. So that includes animals. So if you work with meat, or if you're a butcher, that's not going to be good for you. Or like making weapons, selling weapons, any kind of drugs, alcohol, any of those types of things. If you're involved with any of that, you need to find a different livelihood. And then the last part, the right effort, the intentions, how and what they say with this, and I like this too, that even though you might do the right thing, if you're doing it for the wrong reason, it's not really the right thing, and they would say that's bad karma, because your intentions aren't pure, and so your intentions are what matter, which that's pretty good. Right awareness, being mindful, staying in the moment, not focusing too much on the past or the future, but living like right now, and the right meditation. Depending on the branch of Buddhism, meditation looks different. So you have some that we talked about last time that practice something called Zazen, which is just complete emptying your mind of everything and just trying to actively think of nothing. There's a type of meditation where you try and focus on like one of the noble truths or one of the eightfold pathway, one of these things, something to better yourself so you can better other people, and just really focus in on that and focus how to do that. There's also a form of meditation that's more chanting than meditation, and it's saying the same thing over and over. It's like a repetition thing. So that way your mind can focus while you're saying those words in a chant, that your mind focuses on some other things, which is really interesting. I guess I'll mention this now. So, okay, there's this book. It's called The Winning Life, An Introduction to Buddhist Practice. Meredith got me that. Well, she didn't give me that. Her friend that she knits with, who is a practicing Buddhist, got this book and was letting me read it and things. And it's really interesting. And there's a lot of this specific branch. I was really interested to see what Buddhism in the U.S. looks like, and what does somebody practicing in Somerset, Kentucky look like. And it's really surprising because this conversation was much different than a conversation I had just a few days ago with a friend of mine who I met in Lexington. He preaches now somewhere, Texas maybe. And we discussed, because I knew he had a background in Buddhism. I think he came from Utah. Somewhere. He was from somewhere. Anyways, he had this connection. And those experiences were completely different. And even some of the terminology, some of the language, it was different. And so when I get to the part where we talk about how you talk to someone who is a practicing Buddhist or in Buddhism, what do you say? What do you go about? You got to talk to them. you got to ask them questions, see where they are, because there are so many different paths that you might be going down. I guess we could talk a little bit more about some of this stuff and then get into some of the other thoughts. Any thoughts on any of what we've talked about so far?
Got some questions, but I'm going to hold off.
Are you sure? Okay. Well, we'll see. Oh no. well, okay. I guess we'll talk about the reincarnation thing a little bit, the samsara, the rebirth. Again, we discussed this a little bit last time, but just as a recap, reminder, the idea of karma is what drives the reincarnation, rebirth. And depending on where your karma is and what your karma looks like when you die, you might, there what do you say, 10 different levels that you could be at, and human is one of the level. And so maybe you come back as a human, but maybe you go lower. Maybe it's an animal. Maybe it's one of the lower levels that are more punishment based. Or maybe you ascend to one of the higher levels that more of a, I don't even know if you could say a spiritual being, but someone who is a little more elevated in importance. And regardless, if you are reincarnated, that means you're still stuck in this cycle of samsara. And that is a bad thing. We want to escape that cycle. That's the idea that as long as you're still in the cycle, you don't have enough karma to break out, to exit the cycle. And so they want to achieve nirvana, enlightenment, Buddhahood, whatever you want to call that, in order to break free of that. And again, once that's done, the idea is you are no longer going to be reborn. You have exited that, and you're gone. So that's sort of the ultimate goal. Actual worship, and that's using that word. It depends on how you look at it. So worship practices. I don't think a lot of Buddhists would consider praying to Buddha like a thing. You might see some things that resemble that, and some people might. But when you think about praying to Buddha, like having a Buddha statue, there are many different Buddhas, and so it's hard to pinpoint what they might be accustomed to. So like the Buddha who started Buddhism was the guy we talked about on page 37, Siddhartha Gautama. And so the picture there on page 39 of that statue, that's him. That's what he was supposed to be like. And I've had this conversation with some of you. Some of you might be more familiar with a larger figure that is a little more jolly looking. And that was actually a Chinese Buddhist who he was like a master who became a Buddha. That I can't remember his name. They called him Budai, Budai, and he was a Chinese monk. And I think it was one of the ones that helped found the Chan Buddhism, which eventually turned into Zen Buddhism, which is common over here. But he was seen as like this like really kind of eccentric, like funny, jolly kind of guy. And I think over time, jolly has turned into bigger. And so in the East, you have him represented as laughing Buddha, but we have a more derogatory name over here. And so there's that. So there are different things, though. What that does, though, the idea of why you have that statue, why you have that altar, and sometimes they even call it an altar. And they will generally do their meditation or chanting or whatever it is in front of this altar. And the goal is to eliminate other distractions, to focus on the teachings of the Buddha. And there's this thing with hand positions that are important. You might have different statues of Buddha to signify different things, like left hand resting on thigh, right hand pointing downward, the assertion of Buddhahood, like talking about how Buddha defeated Mara, the evil spirit that we talked about last time, and ultimately us trying to ascend to Buddhahood, what they would think. Right hand upward, palm facing the viewer. That's a blessing to the people in the present, so when you're seeking a blessing. Or the other thing, right hand upward with the thumb and forefinger closed. It's very specific. But that teaching the way of salvation. Salvation in the sense of attaining the Buddhahood or nirvana. And so, yeah, you got those home practices, you got different things. This one, this particular branch of Buddhism, which is Nichiren Buddhism. What was I'm trying to remember. By remember, I mean look it up because I don't remember. The chant. So, like the way this one works, if you were a practicer of this one, you would chant the words Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Several, just over and over, 15, 20 minutes at a time, sometimes even more. And that is to clear your mind of everything and focus on these Buddhism practices. There's, the clothing thing, no requirements. The diet, a lot of Buddhists do eventually become vegans, vegetarians, usually the vegan route, because of the thoughts on, being harmful to other creatures. What do you mean?
Well, it's with Hinduism, they believe that you fly back today, and it's kind of like how I live here in this life. I'm
Oh, I see.
reincarnated as a caterpillar or a cat or something like that.
Right. Yes. Yeah, I think that is definitely part of it because, like, theoretically, we aren't an individual. We are part of everything, and everything is part of everything else. And if we're hurting part of what we see, we're hurting ourselves, and that's negative karma. Right. And yeah, that's a hard question to answer, and it really depends on the type, the specific branch of Buddhism, of like what does it look like to reach enlightenment or nirvana or Buddhahood or whatever, and depending on the branch, it might look very different. Like for example, the type that the one that we know. What they say is that everyone can reach Buddhahood in their own situation. Like you don't have to become a monk. You don't have to like go out. But if you are able to, and it's really through chanting that you are able to empty yourself and all that. Once you reach that point of enlightenment where you were not bothered by physical things, you're not. You are able to separate yourselves from that and not feel, really not feel a whole lot, then you are able to consider yourself to have reached nirvana and will exit the system of reincarnation and all of that. Right, yeah. Yeah, that's my understanding. It's fine. Right.
Think about that just rationally. If there's no continuous self-existence, then when you get reincarnated, how do you know you're Buddhist? You have to come back around to that thought somehow, some way, and if you don't, you're not going to continue down that path. It just really falls apart at that point. At least Hinduism, they say that it continues. Your
Right.
self-existent state continues into the next existence, whatever that might be. So.
That is a really good point. And the thought process behind that is very helpful because when you think about Buddhism distinct from Hinduism especially, it is very much Hinduism. There is this concept of self, and you are preserved through the reincarnation, and you as an individual exist. But Buddhism is very much so you are not really your own person. You are part of something else, and so there is no way to really connect yourself with anything. And so, like, one thing that my friend, I should have pulled this up earlier, but one thing that led my friend away from Buddhism and into Christianity, he said that, I'll just read some of this because I think it's interesting, and so here it is. He dabbled with Buddhism because of martial arts. So he said it's probably different than someone who was raised in it or made the commitment to be a monk, and very much so, different backgrounds and all that. What helped him was to take the Buddhist philosophy to its logical conclusion, and thinking through some of that. And so I think that that's helpful to ask questions to see where they stand on certain things. If you are not an individual, then what ultimate good does this accomplish? What is this doing? What's the logical conclusion of this? One thing that helped him is the concept of love, because if you think about what love is, and love is such a driving thing that I think we all experience, we all think about. Hopefully, we all understand love somewhat. But if you think about what the definition of love is, really it's this unselfish thing that is looking out for the needs of others, right? And that's really what the main basis of what love is, and definitely the love that we see from God. But if you are reaching this enlightenment, nirvana, where you become one with everything and you are part of everything, what's that love designed to do? What is it helping? I mean, ultimately, it turns into a self-preservation thing. And so it boiled down, I think, what we're coming to this crossroads of what is more important, the self or others. And so we have a choice to make between, and what he calls it is a selfish or no self worldview. That it's focused on me as an individual, but I'm not really an individual, so it's not really a self thing. Or it's a selfless worldview, where we have the gospel, which God, a separate being from us, showed love to us, showed mercy, and sent His Son to die for me, in my place, to take my punishment. And that is a much different worldview, a much different conversation. So really, it does get to this. The crux of the matter is what really motivates us and what drives us. Because we talked. Do you remember? We brought this up last week. What is the major problem in Christianity that we as a people, the human race, what is the problem that's weighing us down? It's sin. And sin is the reason why we have suffering, why we have pain, why we have all of this stuff that's in our lives. Suffering is a part of this. It's a part of, one, the punishment, but two, in a way, suffering can actually be beneficial to us in a lot of ways, because it's through suffering, several passages that indicate this. It's the suffering that leads us closer, that we can learn a lot from. We can learn that. Whereas Buddhism, the main problem that humans are trying to eliminate is suffering. That is the thing. Because in that worldview, in that mindset, if you can eliminate suffering, then we have fixed everything. Because if we could live an existence without suffering, then that seems pretty good. So, yeah.
So there, the form of no suffering is to reach the state of nirvana. And what is that again?
Well, when you're alive, it means that you have come to the conclusion, the realization, the knowledge that you are not an individual. You are part of everything else, and that you aren't really connected with the physical world around you. And so what that results in is ultimately going into a state of non-existence. So
That's a form of heaven.
you could say that. Yeah. Yeah.
So really, with what I was saying a minute ago, and with what you just said there, when you talk about nirvana, you would almost, because of their belief that there's not a self-existence into the next life, you'd almost have to become a monk and be tremendously serious with that to even come close to being able to reach nirvana.
I think in most traditions, for Buddhism, yes. Now, I'm really bad at seeing all viewpoints of and seeing, because there are proponents of Buddhism that they're different. They take different paths to this, and so nirvana for some might look different, and it might have different distinctions and all that. But I do see what you're saying.
Well, and again, I don't mean to jump ahead, but
That's fine.
talking to someone who's a Buddhist, and I have Buddhist friends like this, because what you just said is extremely true. And you can even just take that thought and just, like you said, ask question after question after question, because my friend actually believed that Nirvana was heaven, and that when you died, you went to Nirvana.
Gotcha.
So think about that. That's like an offshoot of Christianity. It's like you're taking Christianity and Judaism and putting it in, that. So, I mean, if you really ask them questions, they start to see that their religion has been a growing evolution. It is not like
Right.
you can go from Genesis to Revelations, and you can see he's coming, he's here, he's coming back. You can see the story. Buddha, he's all over the place. It's just a matter of themselves meditating, becoming better people, which is not a bad thing.
Right.
It's just, it doesn't really have a cohesive end to it.
That's a good thought.
Buddhists don't technically worship anything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how do you call working a religion, I guess? Like, isn't that the whole thing about is worshiping a higher being?
Not necessarily. Holding to a specific viewpoint or way of life. We use the phrase sometimes. This person washes their hands religiously or something. Just holding to like a set way of living. So in that sense of the word, that's why it's included. But there are some people who would consider themselves Buddhist who would not consider themselves religious. Because of the separation of there's no worship and there's that mentality. But again, there's so many different branches, and so you would have to ask the specific person.
In some ways, you might call it a self-religion.
Yeah,
Everything is inward, internal.
it is right.
Typically meditation and the purging of desires and whatnot.
Right, and that is a good way to look at it. This boils down, I think, to using. So realizing that I am not experiencing life how I want it, how it needs to be, not living life to my full potential or whatever. There's several things that might lead people down to that path to get involved with Buddhism. And I mean, just think about it at face value. Why this is such a positive thing for a lot of people, or why is it such a draw for a lot of people? Why are people interested in this sort of thing? Because a lot of the precepts, a lot of the things that you consider, if you leave out the idea of, we have broken our relationship with our Creator and we need to reattain that. Like take that out of the picture and think about what Buddhism addresses. Some of the basic human needs and the desires that humans have, which this is kind of a caveat type thing, because one of the greatest desires that they have is to remove all desires. So it's kind of like a paradox. But when you consider a lot of this, it is self-betterment, making me a better person and how I can treat other people better. And there is even one of the major things that you'll hear Buddhists talking about is no harm. We don't want to harm other people. We want to live in harmony. We want to do good for others. And if you think about that, does that work? I mean, if you, in general, are a person who treats others kindly and you look at and think the best out of other people and you present yourself as that, I mean, in general, that's what you experience and that's what you see. That not all the time, but you can see how the change of mindset can make people's lives better. And this is something I listen to a lot on some of the secular Buddhism podcast or whatever. They were talking about how much anxiety people have now, and how busy life is. And if you can do something where you are just still and you're meditating, you're quiet, or you're chanting, or whatever, for a specific period of time a day, or you're focused on a good thing that you need to be doing, and then eventually you start doing those things, could those benefit you, like personally, personal growth? Yeah, I mean, those sorts of things, if you get in the habit of doing that, it's going to make you a better person. Now, I think the argument isn't whether or not we need to be better people, because I think we do, but the thing that we need to be searching for is ultimately, how do we repair this break that we have in the relationship between us and our Creator? And that's the ultimate thing, and I think that is the thing that separates Christianity from some of the other Eastern religions, especially, because of that concept of what we're trying to accomplish.
If I understand it correctly, it seems to me like the structure of Buddhism and is close, almost like at a different level or a different subset of religion. There's no sense of loyalty to anyone or any god. When you think about Catholicism and Islam, at least they're closer to structure
Yes.
to Christianity, and being that they have, at least think of God as, or their God as, where it just seems like it's just a mindset and a structure to live by.
Yes.
And if it's true, then, I mean, it almost proves its invalidity. It was conceived in 210 BC.
Yeah. And I see what you're saying there, because like the ever-changing nature, and this is actually, it goes along with the second noble truth of what they teach. Everything is impermanent and ever-changing, even the things that they do as Buddhists, because things change as culture changes, and so you're kind of a product of what's around you, but these things are constantly being changed because things change over time. And so this is like this eternal turnover of things that are constantly shifting and changing. And that alone, I think from our standpoint and from our mindset, we see, okay, no, we hold to God's unchanging hand. We seek the things that are eternal, that always have been and always will be. Because God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so that, I think, that really puts us at odds automatically in our mind with that. Now, what we do with that, there are some people who just really like that. They really like the idea of it's ever-changing and it's constantly evolving, and I'm changing, so the world's changing, so I want to be part of something that is changing too. And so that, I think there's a lot of people who like that sort of thing, and that's what they are seeking.
Am I correct in understanding that it's basically a religion that was invented before you trace Christianity and even Islam, they trace it back to at least the beginning of time, that they began is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say when anything, this is the starting date. But I think, and especially because written traditions were hard in the time period when Siddhartha Gautama was around, when he was a person. In 563 BC, a lot of things were word of mouth, oral traditions, and it was a couple hundred years later before someone had recorded some of the teachings and that sort of thing. And so it's hard to pinpoint a lot of this exactly, and to track its changes throughout time. But yeah, that is a valid point. Yeah.
Just real quick to give you an idea, if you've got a timeline, biblically, this is around the time when the Israelites were in bondage in Babylon.
Yeah.
So
That's a good point.
he's not really that old.
Yeah. That is a good point. It's not like
Not that old.
right, and that is true. And you can see there are people. Like this book, for example, it very much, you can trace its lineage to this person came here and they taught this, and it's this person's teachings we are following. But again, they don't look at it as like we're trying to find what the Creator has revealed to us. It's more of this person taught some things that will help us to achieve our own enlightenment. And so it's a completely different frame of mind. And so that's why it's really hard for us as Americans right now to put ourselves in the position to see where a lot of people from this mindset are coming from. And so that's why it's really important for us to have these conversations and come to those realizations, so that way we can connect and we can reach people. But again, what do we do? How do we talk to people? Ask questions. Just really get an idea of where they are. There's no one way to go about this and have a conversation and teach, because you don't know what that person individually, what kind of concept they have, because there are some that have mixtures. There are some people who are Buddhist who also believe in a creator. Buddhism doesn't really touch, that. And so there's a lot of things to go on with that. But ultimately, I think the evidence of Christ's resurrection, if you can focus conversation on that there was a person, Jesus Christ, who came to this earth, was put to death, and he rose from the dead. That is major. And if we can establish that fact, the better we are at establishing that, the better we are at leading people. Now, some of these other conversations I think are really important to have, though, as far as thinking through the logical end of the reasoning and that. We need to have those conversations. But be prepared to have something, okay, well, if this is where that leads, let's consider this, and let's look at the resurrection of Christ. Because, for someone to have this mindset of, well, once you die, you either come back as something else, but it's not really you, you're not a person. To have somebody who has died, but then comes back as their self, and it is that person who died, who is resurrected, there's some power in that. And that will do something for the conversation for sure. Yeah.
And most of these religions that you're talking about, and we'll talk about, that is a good way to get most people in a good conversation. And Buddhist is the same way, because Buddha and the fairy tale of Buddha in one has a lot of good things. It has compassion, it has understanding, it has peace, it has introspection, it has all these self-discipline, all these good things. And you say, Jesus was like that, and you start talking about, the comparison between Buddha and Jesus. What happened to Buddha? He died.
Yeah.
What happened to Jesus? He rose. And
Yeah.
so,
Right. And that's powerful, right there. I like that. That was good to end on. If you have any other things you want to talk about, welcome that. But thank you for class. Appreciate it.